In this video, I'm going to go over the main things a DM does to run a D&D game. And by the time we get to the end, you should have a solid understanding of what it means to be a DM. Hey, Lughard here. I have been a Dungeon Master since high school, and I make weekly videos with information and resources to help other DMs run awesome games. So, if you're looking to level up your D&D game, roll a crit on that subscribe button down below. Alright, let's get into this. I made a list, and I checked it twice, and came up with 12 things that Dungeon Masters do. Now, as we're going through this list, I want you to remember one overriding thing. The main goal of a Dungeon Master, no matter what he is doing, is to facilitate fun for his players. And what I mean is, all of these things that I'm about to go over, you do them all with the goal of your players enjoying themselves at your table. That is your mission. Now, the very first thing you're going to need to do as a Dungeon Master is actually find players for your game, because if you don't have players, then you can't really run a game, at least not the last I checked. And so finding players to start with, and then also as players leave or move or drop out, or as things come up in their lives and they can no longer continue playing, then you're going to need to find replacement players for them, or your game will just kind of slowly peter out until you have no players. I think it's possible that lots of campaigns and games kind of die that way. Players just keep on going away and you keep losing them until you have none left. So finding replacement players is a very important thing as a Dungeon Master to keep in mind and to be on top of that so your game doesn't just out. I actually made a video about finding players for your games. I'll put a link to that up in the card. Alright, the second thing that Dungeon Masters generally are responsible for is scheduling the actual game session. So you've got players, you have decided how frequently you're going to play, you've decided what days you're going to play on, what times, and a lot of times this is something that the DM plays a key role in figuring out for the players, for the group as well. But once you've decided all of that, as the Dungeon Master, you kind of play the role of the logician, is that a word? The logitician, something like that. And you basically are responsible for letting other players know, hey, our next game session is on this date, sending out reminder emails and things like that. Just you're basically coordinating the game getting together. Now, there are some exceptions to this. For instance, if you're running a West Marches style of play, then this might not be what the Dungeon Master does at all. All right, number 3, as a Dungeon Master, you are going to be helping players learn the game. Now, some players are going to come and they're going to know Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition or whatever you run down pat, and they're not going to need your help. They are going full blast as it is. However, some of your players are going to be new. It might be their first time ever playing Dungeons & Dragons at all, and you're going to have to basically take that person alongside you, show them the ropes, help them learn how to play. Now, it isn't solely the DM's responsibility. I mean, the players are also part of this and helping that person learn how to play the game, but it is definitely something the DM should be taking the lead on, helping to get that new player into the gaming group, help him feel comfortable, right, and teach him how to play the game. All right, number 4, as the Dungeon Master, it's your responsibility as well to help players create their characters if they need your help. Now, if you have veteran players, it's quite possible that they won't need your help, but if you have newer players, then they're probably going to need your help because, in my opinion, character creation is one of the most complicated and time-consuming and possibly difficult parts of the game for new players. Now, veteran players, they dig character creation, I think, and they love doing it, so that's not really an issue. But a new player could feel totally lost in the character creation process. So as the Dungeon Master, you want to make sure you're helping him out. Other thing the Dungeon Master does as well is review character sheets as your players finish them up. Just give them a quick look over, make sure they're not forgetting something here or there. I tend to review all of my players' character sheets, and I usually find things that they did and when corrected, work in their favor for them. And so that's something, too, that I think a Dungeon Master should consider doing. All right, number 5. As a Dungeon Master, you are responsible for planning out the campaign that you're going to be running. Now, a campaign is really just a string of different adventures that tied together are going to span a certain number of levels, maybe level 1 to 15 or something like that. And your players will play these different adventures and gain levels as you go. So Dungeon Master is going to plan that out. And part of planning that out is planning out the individual adventures, creating the adventures, what monsters are in them, What is the storyline? What is the plot? Like, what's kind of happening? What is the situation, right? Dungeon Master is going to be thinking about those things and crafting these adventures together for his players to experience. Now, I created a video on creating adventures. I will put a link to that up in the card, so you can go check that out if you want. It gives some helpful advice about how to create your own adventures, and it also has in there a template that I use to create my adventures. It's basically a Word document with different sections and stuff, and I just go through and I fill them in, and I create an entire adventure. That is how I do my homebrews. All right, now here's the thing. Creating campaigns and adventures might be pretty daunting for you, especially if you're a new DM. Now, you might love that idea and just go full bore, and it just, like, your creativity just comes out on paper or however it is you plan your adventures, and you love that thing. However, that isn't the only way to do it, right? There are things called modules that are created by different companies that you can go out and buy these. This one right here is Princes of the Apocalypse, and basically what this is an entire campaign already planned out for you, right? And it has tons of different adventures in it. I mean, I'm not going to flip through the thing right now, but the point is that if planning out a campaign and creating individual adventures is not something that you really want to do, or maybe it's something you're not totally comfortable with doing, then you can go out and get one of these professionally published modules, right? And run these at your table instead. And especially if you're a new dungeon master, then this might be a good way for you to start out, just so you get an idea of what a campaign looks like and how to do an adventure and what these things are kind of like. This will get you going, and then once you kind of get the feel for it and you have a good idea of how to do it, then you can dabble in creating your own campaigns and your own adventures. So definitely a very solid way to go. Now, these books generally, now if you get them at full price, they're usually like $50, but you can go on Amazon and get these bad boys for usually around $30 or so. And there's lots of good stuff in here. I read a little bit of this one myself, and I'm looking forward to running Curse of Strahd with one of my groups coming up here. It might be a while before we get to it, but some of these are really, really cool. So definitely check these out. Oh, real quick, I want to let you know that I have a Patreon page set up now if you'd like to become a part of supporting the work I do in creating these videos in order to help DMs run awesome games. I also have lots of really cool perks available for my patrons, so if you're interested in that and you want to check that out, I will put a link down in the description for you. All right, number 6. The DM is also responsible for creating the world that all of the adventures take place in. I mean, this means creating like continents and cities and all of this kind of stuff, but that can be very daunting. In fact, I don't even do that. I use a pre-made world. I run things in Forgotten Realms. Let me show you this bad boy right here. So this right here is the pre-made world that I use. This is Forgotten Realms campaign setting. Now, this one right here, this isn't the current one. I don't know if there is a current one besides like Sword Coast Adventures guide or whatever. But this one right here is from 2nd edition. This is the one that I bought when I was in high school. This is the actual literal box, and the books aren't in here. The books are somewhere else. But I use this. This is what I use. I don't spend my time creating like the world and cities and all this stuff inside of them, right? I use this. I use Forgotten Realms. I love Forgotten Realms. I grew up reading Forgotten Realms books, so I really, really dig it. So, but this isn't the only one, right? There are lots of different ones that you can check out. There's Eberron. There's Dark Sun. Oh, I really want to run a Dark Sun game at some point. That'll be totally cool. But the point is there are lots of these pre-made worlds. So if the thought of creating an entire world is daunting to you, and it is to me, which is the reason that I don't do it, I just take it's the shortcut, but I think it works really well. So that is available for you if you don't want to go the full route of creating your own world. All right, number 7, the Dungeon Master runs the game at the table, like the actual game session. I mean, most of the stuff we've been talking about has nothing to do with actually sitting at a table running the game. But obviously at some point when the Dungeon Master has gotten players and created an adventure and developed a world or used pre-existing stuff, the Dungeon Master is actually going to physically run that game at his table. Now, when you're running the game at your table, one of your primary responsibilities is to describe what the player's characters see in your game world. And you're going to want to describe what they hear and possibly what they taste and what they feel. It is your job as a Dungeon Master to paint the picture of what they see in your world, in that adventure that you're currently running. And then after you've described those things, your players are going to want to interact with your game world. They're going to want to touch things. They're going to want to say things. They're going to want to do things. And it's your job as a Dungeon Master to decide what happens as a result of their doing those things. Now, yes, to a certain extent, what happens as a result of your players doing things does depend on what the dice say, but it also depends a large part on the Dungeon Master making decisions too. Alright, number 8. As the Dungeon Master, you're also going to be role-playing all of the NPCs in the world. Now, when I say NPCs, I also mean not only townsfolk and other people they might run into, but I'm also talking about monsters and enemies, because really, those are NPCs as well. Now for me, running NPCs is one of the most enjoyable parts of being a Dungeon Master. I personally love doing special voices for my NPCs, like, I might do a kobold voice and talk like this, or if I'm a devil or a demon, I'll have this really angry demonic voice. Or if I'm a townsfolk, like intimidated by the players and their power, I might talk like this. But the point is that is like, for me, that's a really fun part of running the game. Now, you don't have to do special voices, right? There are lots of Dungeon Masters that don't do any of those special voices at all, and their games are awesome too. So don't feel like you need to do that. It is a part of it. If you like doing it, then you certainly can, but by no means required. There are still other parts of role-playing NPCs that are equally fun. You're going to decide what their motivations are. You're going to decide what they want. You're going to decide what their means are, how they're going to go about getting those. There are lots of really cool things about running an NPC that has nothing to do with special voices. Alright, number 9. Dungeon Master. You are the adjudicator of rules. And what does that mean? I mean, at a basic level, it means that you should be pretty familiar with the rules, or at least know where and how to look them up really quick if you need to. And it also means that you decide how the rules are applied. Sometimes there, especially if you're running 5th edition, there are gray areas, things that aren't super clear. And as a Dungeon Master, it's your job to make decisions on how a rule is applied in a certain situation. And from time to time, you're going to be required to make a special ruling. We often call it a house rule, because like I said, gray areas, things aren't clear, and you're just going to have to make a decision. Listen guys, we've kind of talked this out for a minute or so, and this is the decision that I'm going to make and how this rule is applied. We're going to do that, we're going to go forward with the game, we're going to keep on playing, and then you could even tell them that offline, you're going to look it up and look at it a little bit more to come up with a final ruling. But the point is that you're going to have to make decisions, final decisions on how those rules are applied. Hey, real quick, what I want you to do is down in the comments, let me know what for you is the most exciting part about being a Dungeon Master, and also let me know what is the most intimidating part about being a Dungeon Master. Alright, number 10. If you play with a grid and minis, then buying and probably painting miniatures is going to be a big part of your life. I think that playing with miniatures on a grid, especially in combats, is a really awesome thing and can make your games much more fun and engaging for your players. However, it's certainly by no means necessary. In fact, one of my games I run purely as what we call theater of the mind, without miniatures or a grid or anything like that, and it is completely awesome. It lends itself really well to narration and really describing things out and painting a picture in your players' minds of what's going on. So a grid and minis is by no means necessary. However, I think you can see from all this B-roll that I'm putting here that there is some really cool stuff that you can do with grid and minis. However, I do want to be very clear that playing with a grid and minis is not by any means necessary, and you could make your game just as engaging and just as fun without them. In fact, one of the games that I run, my weekly game with some people from work, is played entirely without grid and minis. We do it totally theater of the mind is how we call it. And it is amazing. It gives the Dungeon Master, playing that style, gives the Dungeon Master the ability, or the opportunity, I should say, to really paint things out and describe things with his words. And that is tons of fun too. So by no means should you feel that playing with the grid and minis is necessary or something you need to do. And especially if you just flat up don't have the money to invest in all of that things, or if you're just getting started and you're not sure if you actually want to go full bore on this, then don't feel like you need to buy all that stuff. They can get really expensive, especially as they add up. So not a required part of the game by any means. Alright, number 11. This is kind of building on the grid and minis, and I'm going to start rolling some B-roll here, and you can see here that you can get really into it, right? There is some awesome terrain that you can get from a place called Dwarven Forge, or you can make your own terrain. There's a guy who does videos here on D&D, and I'm forgetting his name, but he shows ways that you can make your own terrain, and it is super, super cool. I'm sure I'm going to remember his name after the fact, and if I can remember, I'll put a link up in the card or something to him. So it's like Dungeon Craft. I got it. I remembered. Dungeon Craft. This is a guy who does videos on how to make your own terrain, and it is really, really cool. So I will remember, if I can, to put a link to Dungeon Craft somewhere on here so you can check it out. Or you can just buy it. But you can see here, I've been throwing some B-roll here for you, and there's really cool stuff that you can either buy or make, and this is going to really be awesome for your game if you can do this. Now, I don't do this. I don't have the money or the wherewithal or the time to create it myself. So I don't have all of this stuff, and my groups have plenty of fun without them. But if you want to get into this, then you can really go full bore and have tons of fun. And I mean, it would be super cool to run games like this too. So that's something you can consider, right? I mean, if you've got like excess money and you got time to make it yourself, then by all means, this is something you get into. But again, totally not required. I would say that the majority of groups, the vast majority of groups, do not have all of this terrain and resources and stuff. So don't feel like you need to do it. It's an option though. It's something that's out there that might be something you consider to take your game to the next level. All right, number 12, resolving player issues. This is going to happen. It's definitely going to happen in your groups where you have a problem with a player, something is going on, and it is your job as a dungeon master to take the lead on resolving that player problem. Now, I did an entire video on resolving player problems, so I will put a link up in the card or down below in the description for you. All right, so if you made it this far through the video, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, geez, Luke, that is a lot of stuff that a dungeon master has to do. And yeah, it is a lot of stuff. For my games, I generally find that for every 2 hours of table time, like let's say you have a 4-hour game session, for every 2 hours of table time, I'm going to spend about 1 hour preparing for that game. So if I have a 4-hour game, then I'm spending at least 2 hours preparing for that game. However, that preparation time kind of assumes that I've already created an adventure for that game session. And if I have to create an adventure, it can take me, I mean, I'm just going to spitball here. I think it probably takes me about 8 hours to create an adventure for one of my tables, for one of my games, and that adventure might last about 4 different sessions. So that time goes in there as well. Here's the thing though, not all dungeon masters spend the same amount of time preparing for their games. I tend to prepare quite a bit more, I think, than many dungeon masters would. So there are lots of DMs that prepare a whole lot less, and I'm going to assume that they run just as fun games perhaps as I do. So this is possibly just a difference in approaches. I don't know, it might be. So keep that in mind. Don't feel overly daunted by this whole long list of things you got to do. I don't think it's quite as bad as I maybe made it sound in this video. And here's the other thing. I run 4 different Dungeons & Dragons games. I have a full-time job. I create all of these YouTube videos. I have a family that I spend time with. We're currently in the middle of trying to move to a different house, and I have time for all of this stuff. So, I mean, you can definitely make it work, but I think the question still remains, if it's all of that work, why would you go and do that, especially for 4 different games? Here's the thing. Dungeon mastering is one of the most fun and rewarding things that I've ever done with my life. Not the most, right? I mean, there are definitely things that I've done that have been more important and been more meaningful, but it definitely ranks up there. One of the things that I really love about being a dungeon master is seeing my players have fun. Like the looks on their faces when they're just enjoying themselves. Here's the thing. So I record all of my game sessions. They're over on a different channel called the DM Lair Actual Play, and I really enjoy watching little snippets of our game sessions after the fact because I get to see my players having fun. I get to see them laughing and enjoying themselves and interacting with the world, and that is, I think I probably have more fun watching the game sessions afterwards, right, than probably anybody else would, you know. So that is a really cool part of being a dungeon master, just being the person that provides maybe 4 hours of entertainment to a group of your friends, right? You can't really describe the satisfaction you get from that. It's just really cool. Remember, I make Dungeons & Dragons videos every week with the goal of helping dungeon masters run better games. So if you want to level up your game, consider subscribing. As always, if you have any questions about dungeon mastering or Dungeons & Dragons in general, or have any problems with your games, please let me know down in the comments. I'm always happy to help. And until next time, let's play D&D.